because this is a conversation we also have been really looking forward to for a long time. Really because a lot of it connects to this conversation and this theme of the community center, because so our smaller group within the Homo Language Project is doing these different oral history collections, and as our way of collecting and learning about the history and learning about our family's history. And in that process, in some of the stories we were hearing, and just, my dad's story, Rochelle's dad's story, we just knew and started thinking about, there's an interesting connection of these big trajectories of our lives that have been forever shaped from, like, they could be traced back to this community center. And so we were really curious about sort of an oral history mapping project specifically of this community center, and thinking about the impact that it's had. Like, if you could put a visual map on all of the ways that it's now branched out into the world through these opportunities that can connect back to the community center. And so we're excited to talk with you and kind of think about what your experience was in your time with the community center. But really just wanted to also first say, I think I've said this to you in person, but also just wanted to bring this into the group, but really, really appreciate more gratitude, I think, than you know, of how much you had such a huge role in shaping me, because I was a result of, I don't think so much of my dad's life really came from that opportunity of someone seeing something in him that he didn't see in himself and creating this opportunity to say, hey, you should think about this. That would have never been on the radar at all. And just thinking about how, unimaginably different our family's history would have been without that kind of intersection point in history. And I think Rochelle feels very similarly. I'll let her speak to that. But we just wanted to kind of start with this context about this project in particular. So we're hoping to have other conversations with other community members, other elders, and talk with them about, like, really thinking about the place and impact of this community center, and using that as sort of like our focus point in thinking about family histories and stories and culture. So anyway, we're really excited to hear your thoughts on this.
Well, co-chair, you're going to make me cry. Yeah. Let me just tell you, I mean, like when I got to do your grandmother, Bruce's mother, Anna Mae, I mean, in another time with opportunities, she'd have been the president of Pepsi or something. I mean, this woman had brains. She could read the Bible all the time, knew how to handle people, knew people, could handle any situation, a great sense, and you just got there, and like people like Ricky and Bruce, and you just said, like, I was, my father was a minister, like middle class, but been so many opportunities I had, and all that was missing were all these wonderful folks with just opportunity, and so you and the old cliche, you get back more than you put in, is really, but it's just been just the joy of my life to see. And just like now, like Bruce, I know he trains all these people that go on, work for the Secretary of Interior and do all these jobs all over. And I'm sure he, feels that way. But anyway, I should just shut up. But thank you for saying that. So it was just, I love all these men and women, and, it's just it was it's like really the best job of my life down there. So.
I think I'll echo what Alana was saying. We've
had go on, please.
Yeah. We've had a lot of opportunities to kind of sit back and reflect and think about the trajectory that our lives have taken as a result of one person's involvement in the community. It's really remarkable, and it empowers me to feel like I can really make a difference when I look at the way that your example has had a generational impact and will continue to do so. And so this opportunity to be able to face-to-face, virtually, but face-to-face, be able to just extend the kind of gratitude that I feel in my heart for the way that you have impacted my family and me personally. It gives me a lot of gratification to just be able to tell you what that means to us. And there's so many examples of the way that the Dulac Community Center really has this ripple effect in so many people's lives, and that you were a part of that, and that you really dug your heels into something to try and make a better world for people in a community outside of your own. So it's a lot about you. And I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be able to see you here today and tell you that. And I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Oh, well, thank you. And I have to say too, you know, everything we tried to do, I mean, there was such support throughout the community for it. People were really longing, you know, to have better opportunities, you know. I mean, it's as you guys know, the economy of it, it's such an individualized culture. I mean, shrimp fishermen, who's more individual, you know, and each person's kind of, and in a way, it was kind of a strength that the homeless had, that other, you know, so many other tribes are in areas that are economically destitute. And at least, you know, we probably destroyed the world with the fossil fuel, but there were jobs in that, although you had to, you know, there was discrimination too. And certainly, you know, fishing was so individualized. And the thing I really like that you all are doing is, and you know, I have no idea, but my sister's still in Houma. She just retired teaching in Houma. So I do go down every year, and I usually go down to do like every other year and stuff. But you know, at the time, it was disturbing to me that things were so atomized and balkanized. There wasn't like like, as I was leaving, the Houma Nation was coming in, and people from Golden Meadow in the city were, you know, organizing United Houma. But the first 3 or 4 years I was there, there was, you know, really not a community organization, for, you know, for a lot of different reasons. But it's so great to see the kind of the language project and you guys' influence. And I'm so glad you're all, you know, not just out there in LA or San Francisco, wherever the hell you are, Rochelle. You know, and just like, oh, that's my past, you know, and I'm great for, you know, and involved in that community. That's really wonderful. That's really needed too.
So speaking about past, that was one of the things that we wanted to ask you. So we want to know where you grew up. You know, this man who ended up in New Orleans and New Orleans area, but you know, in the bayous. You know, we want to know what got you here, what languages you grew up learning or speaking, and what cultural and or ideological backgrounds influenced you.
Yeah, I was raised in California and born in Burbank, and lived in the little cow town of Bishop, which is up by Mount Whitney. And then it turned out my older brother went to Caltech, and his roommate, who was from Yonkers, New York, told my brother and I, you guys should apply to, you know, I wanted to go to Cal Santa Barbara. It looked good to me. Still does, by the way. Anyway, so he urged us, like, they, you know, there's geographical distribution, and he told us, and apply to Dartmouth. And so I did, and somehow it's a long story, but they thought I was a good football player, which I wasn't. So anyway, but I did get in with that boost. And the Bill influence on me was the civil rights movement. There was a chaplain at Dartmouth that had worked with Dietrich Bonhoeffer in Nazi Germany in World War II. And Bonhoeffer was the guy who tried to kill Hitler and was hung for it. And he was, this guy was, I don't know how he got it through at Dartmouth without getting fired, but he was a true revolutionary. And we had, when I was a senior, John Lewis and James Foreman from SNCC came up, and Bayard Rustin, the guy who planned the March on Washington. And we had Fannie Lou Hamer from the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party. And we had and in the summer I went to Washington, and we did civil rights lobbying. So, and we had a Friends of SNCC chapter that raised money for SNCC. So when I got out, the Vietnam War was raging, and I was fortunate enough to get conscientious objector status to the draft. I I don't know if I'd have gone to Canada, to jail. You don't know what you would have done if, all these, but I got conscientious objector status. So I wanted to go to the South just because when you're a CEO, you don't get paid anything. And I figure if you're not going to get paid much, better not to be in New York City or San Francisco. And also I was very interested in the South because it was kind of the locus of where the country was changing. I think the country's equally guilty of genocide, racism, all these other things, but the South at the time was where change was happening. And I've always sort of, I don't know why I've always loved the South. It's got its crazy place, but I don't know, anyway, the draft board let me pick my own place. So I went to the Methodist Church in New York and I said, you got anything? And they said, May, you come down to Dulac. And so I went the first night there. They were having some youth thing, and they said, go out to this road, make a left, and then go on the Shell Road. And I thought it was like a road named after the Shell Oil Company. So I was like looking for signs. I don't know what it was, but I learned what a Shell Road was the first night. But anyway, so I just got there, and then 2 years later, the guy who was the director left, and I became director. But everybody was, it was what happens. The world, so many jobs are so constrained, like what they want you to do, but there was a job that wasn't constrained. And we had like the Vista program, I guess it's AmeriCorps now. So every year, and Vista had a thing, we could have local vistas and national. So we would have like 3 or 4 people nationally that had really good values, really smart people. And then we'd get 3 or 4 local vistas, and that could expand the the scope of the community center, even though we had a modest budget. And then we really made a huge focus on education, preschool education, and we hired from the public school Mrs. Buke, who was this gifted teacher. And I mean, I really wish we had kept statistics about the kids, because everybody left kindergarten at age 6 could read, because Mrs. Buke was this great phonics teacher, and we had 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, and then for a while we had a mother home program where my sister Mary actually did this, where you bring books to the family to help the mothers with the kids. Half the mothers were like, May, you take care of my kid, I got to watch my stories. But a lot of them really were with it, of course. And that program. And then we tried a lot with, we had Nichols come over and do courses at the community center so that people would find out that, college is very achievable and you can handle it easily. So, I mean, unfortunately, the professor was a joke. And so I was kind of begrudged because, I went over to see him. I was so mad because the class, he just, said, everybody do a report. And then that was the end of the class. There was no real teaching by him. But anyway, so I went over to say, well, I'm going to, keep having the class, but I'm going to quit. And he showed me his grade book, and he's like, May, she gave me a bushel of crabs, A-. It's like, oh my God, this is what you're going to teach people about college. But that, and then just urging people to go to college and trying to get matches for, people and their skills and economically and all that. So anyway, that's kind of how I got there. And I think it was the influence of the civil rights movement. I had visited, as at the Selma March, and I visited Mrs. Hamer in Mississippi. In fact, one time we made a road trip from Dulac over to Mrs. Hamer's house in Millville, Mississippi. And so it was that influence, I think. Yeah. Long answer. I'm sorry.
No, that's perfect. I think that was part of, you queued yourself up well. We were curious about how that sort of transitioned into the role and how the role itself kind of evolved. And you spoke a little bit to some of the programs, but trying to get a sense. And some of that, I love that newsletter that you sent last year, because it was just great to have that, but it was cool to see kind of a highlight of different programs to get a sense of, because I don't know how much you're still in touch with as the directors have evolved over the years, but I think they're really limited have been in the last few years in terms of what services they're doing with the community center. So I'm curious to hear what was the evolution that you saw in your time, like from when you started as a Vista, what kinds of programs were happening, and then how did it change? Did it grow? What happened with sort of the role of the community center?
Yeah, well, I think what happened, you don't always, you're like, everything was great when I was there, but these other people went to hell. I mean, I'm not saying anything went to hell, but it's always tricky to try to, talk about your successors. But what happened is, when I left immediately, Eva Dean Wilson, who was a teacher, she's home in India, and she became director. And then it reverted. Spiller Milton, who was the minister. I mean, the thing that always was challenging was, we were really trying to make it something that's empowering and giving people opportunities. And I mean, I imagine my Christian faith has something to do with that, but mostly just the sense of justice to people. And the church tends to often want to support not such empowering programs. I mean, we tried to do things that were more focused toward that the systems got to be tried to change the system, as well as there's the old thing about teach a man to fish. Not that do like you have to teach anybody how to fish, but teach a man to fish, he can live forever, and you give him a fish, he'll have one meal. But the other thing is, what are the conditions about how we became a fisherman? And like these, the Duike the home Indians were great fishermen, but they couldn't get loans to get bigger boats, and it was a big boat that made you be able to fish year round. And so that's something that we worked on. So you have to not only teach someone to fish, as I said, I couldn't do that, but you have to make sure the system that kind of gets them to being a fisherman, try to make it fair. What we had when I was there, the women's division of the Methodist Church, which was a very progressive group of people, they wanted to see social change. And then structurally in the Methodist Church, kind of while I was there, and with me, but right after, they abolished the women's division and they just put it under the regular church. And so I think I don't know. And I would visit every couple of years, but I mean, I actually, when I was there, I didn't like the groups coming in from Kansas and whatever state they came from. I thought it's okay to have groups, but the way they did, like one time we had a group paint Miss Hooper's house. Hell, we should paint Miss Hooper's house, those of us who live here, and not, have a group do it. And so like we didn't structure it right. I thought with the groups, it ought to be everything's done like jointly, and you have to, volunteer stuff has to be well crafted to make it work and make it be empowering. And instead it was just, I thought it actually sort of reinforced racism. Like we have to come here from Tennessee with our Christian, for these poor homeless. I mean, everybody there's very capable. I just feel like there needs to be an emphasis on having everything be like a partnership, and everybody's got something to teach the other person. But and once again, I haven't really. I'm talking more about the groups in the 70s, and I realize the 70s are long gone. So I don't know what's going on now at the DCC. But.
Can you talk a little bit more about what systems and what types of status quo you hoped to challenge in your time as director?
Well, the main thing we were trying to get, I sort of thought to directly do politics would be like the third rail, kind of like they'd be too hot, if the church sort of said, you're backing a political candidate. So I don't want to be like a Marxist, but I really I don't believe totally in economic determinism, but, economics has a lot to do with how everything, who's got power and who's got, what. So my thing was, let's really focus on the education stuff. That's a long range. And then for the shorter range, let's try economic development programs. I was pretty naive with this, by the way. But what we initially did was, I think with Mr. Gregoire and one of the Verdans, and I was trying to remember all the names, Paput and all that all gets lost in my head. I don't know, but there are 2 or 3 fishermen that we went, and they were really skilled and they had good numbers. And we went to the bank and did applications. Then they bought larger boats, and then with that they were off and running. So we knew there had been in North Carolina there had been a fishing cooperative developed. So this guy Tom Barnwell. So we called him up, and we naively said, well, let's do a fishing co-op. And as you all know how individual the shrimp fishermen are. And so Tom Dion was sort of the leader of it. And we would have, scores of meetings over about a year. And people would come and listen. But, it was sort of like, if you had this, you would have to sell your shrimp to the shrimp co-op, and what if they're, so the question you track, what if your price isn't as good as Audemars or David Luke's or whoever, and it's like it's a hard thing. And also, I think probably a lot of people thought I was trying to get rich out of it. Who knows? But it was so interesting because we got Governor Edwards and Senator Ellender, who was not a progressive. His staff and Governor Edwards' staff, they got us free kind of legal assistance to help us with it. We got the Methodist Church to pledge. That was actually the hardest thing, to get them to give land for it. But we couldn't get people to join. We got like 2 families after a year. And I don't blame them in a way, because your life, you do this if you think you're ostracized, and things were so tenuous. And I also think, probably looking back on it, we probably should have tried to start small. Like, it's hard to get ice at the beginning of the season. We probably should have just tried to get a little ice factory that was homemade, and just do that. Train, not Ricky because he had to go to Berea, but somebody, not Bruce, he had bigger, but train somebody, a local guy to run it. And just, I was very impatient. Like, let's get this up this year. And, people I know that do good social change, like they're on it for 30 years and stuff. And, and 10 years is nothing in this, doing this kind of work. So that the biggest thing I really had was trying, and I was very glad I just kind of stepped out of the way, because I think, white guys from California shouldn't try to, but it was really good when the United Home Nation, when that started to be organized. I know we sent Ricky and I think Eva Dean to like a conference for tribal organization. We try to send people to whatever opportunities there were, but it was a balance, because you don't want to get, your funding source, you don't want to get in the papers, basically. You want to do things under the radar. So,
Yeah, we kind of, I was just like laughing to myself when you were saying, that you try and do this and you kind of get impatient when you come into the community. Because even like myself, I'm part of the community, but I don't live in the community anymore. Like 10 years is really nothing, it's like change happens at a snail's pace. But we were really surprised at what we were able to accomplish because we had computers. I can't imagine the amount of work y'all had to put in without the internet as your aid.
Right. No, it's true. It was just so isolating, really, that that time. It's very different. Now, the other thing that's interesting is, and it's great you guys have this and this, folks, so many people I know, like, when I was lucky enough to be young, like the civil rights and the anti-war movement were happening, and you felt like at your age, you were really involved with social change. we got to go talk to John Lewis, and James Foreman came up from SNCC, and he had this idea. This is the guy who's the administrative director of SNCC, of let's put a teletype at every college, and then we would teletype when they're in Albany, Georgia, getting the shit kicked out of them. They would teletype what's happening and the immediacy of it. He sort of like knew the internet was coming, where you get the immediacy, but he was going to do it with like, these teletype things, because it was 1963 or something. And so I just think other generations, like friends of mine now that are, in their careers and stuff, like, what can you hook up with that's social change? There's great things, tutoring, Big Brothers, Big Sisters, a lot of great things, but it's hard to figure out how you link up with social change with a group that, it's just different. It's hard. And so you all doing your own. That's good. That's really good.
So I don't know if Alana or Rochelle, you wanted to ask another question, because I had a question that I wanted to line up after that.
Go for it.
Okay. Yeah, I was just we're talking about all the changes that happened. Were there any that you like implemented straight away? Like even before you were director, you were just like, as a Vista partner, you're like, no, this needs to happen. I suggest we try and do this. Like, what was like the first big change anyway that you implemented? I know you spoke about trying to get economic growth happening and things like that. Was that one of the first ones?
Yeah, I think the first thing, and I don't know how this is viewed now, but I mean, I'm a big believer in coalitions, and if we could have had a Black, Cajun, Indian coalition, that would be good. So the first thing we did was, the center became like multi-bayou, because we went over to Chauvin and we got some kids from there, because I knew, like, first of all, you had to get the finances were dependent on having people on public assistance. And because so many shrimpers scratched out a living, and they weren't on public assistance, it wasn't just, and so by making the daycare center, people from Dularge and we both had people in need, and also we had a source of finance, which helped everybody. So, and we got economy of scale, because the daycare center got up to like 110 kids. We were able to hire more qualified teachers, blah, blah, blah. So we before it had sort of been just like a lot of times half day, and just sort of the kids that, and just right within the immediate area. So I think it, hopefully it made it like a better daycare center. And, and we also really wanted to teach reading early. And so we just, because I was sort of like daycare center director, I guess, when I got there. And I was like, having read about other areas that, like, the kids that can learn to read before they start first grade, it's such an advantage. So we immediately sort of did that. And then I'm trying to think of, it's not too romantic. I know I also said, let's try to get, one of the things about, I think that you all know, South Louisiana, people don't like to leave home in South Louisiana. And I just really felt like we've got to have ways for people to see the broader world. And let's bring in, like, the Vista. I think the second year I was there, we applied for that program. Let's bring in Vista volunteers, and let's get local Vista, and then let's send people off to training, to sit. And we would also do, we do a lot of trips. It's boring, but, it doesn't sound very exciting, but we go up to Baton Rouge, and, the assemblyman show us around, and into New Orleans for, music, and just trying to give, like, the kids, there's a bigger world out there, you don't have to buy all of it, but check it out and see what parts are for you. So, so I think we tried to make it a little more, outreach to the rest of the world. It's sort of, like home is that area, like the strength is also the weakness, which you often have in things like, is the strength that the families are so strong, but it's also like the kind of an atrophy of, if nobody ever leaves, nobody, like in the Black community, the people would come back, from Southern University, and blah blah blah, and that was a source of friction and energy, and we didn't, we didn't have that as much in Dulac at the time. We're in Dulac, we do what we like, at least.
Trying to kind of create a timeline. Can you help us understand what date you started, what date you became director, and kind of where you headed in a different direction, just so that we know how to place when things are happening?
I know when I got there, I'm a little hazy on when I left. I got there in like February of '69, and I left, it was, I think, early '75. So it was like 5.5 years I was there. And I think I became director like a year and a half after I was there. Yeah, oh yeah, that was the, so, I mean, there was no, like, when Jimmy Aber was the name of the guy who was the director, there was no, like, don't do this, don't do that, so what we were trying to do when I was this daycare center director and youth worker, then we just, we continued to do that. So there wasn't like any coup that I took over. It was it was all more kind of incremental in the same direction.
The daycare coup of '72.
Yeah, exactly right. It'll go down in history. Tiananmen Square, the daycare coup, they're all one revolution.
I just had one clarifying question first, which was like, so if I was, say, a young mother, for example, single mom living in Dulac, and I came to the community center, say in like, let's say in the revolutionary '72, what were, like, could you paint a picture of some of the different kinds of services or programs that were happening that you might say, like, what were some of the different education programs? Were you doing like any of like the food pantry type work at that time?
Yeah, we didn't, there was no food pantry deal there. And in fact, when I got there, there was this room right off the main gym that had like 3,000 wool suits that people had sent down, from the north to help the Indians. And not only, you all know that there's not a lot of call on a wool suit. I mean, they were like Hickey Freeman, nice stuff. But I just think, like, we threw it all out because what are you going to do with? And I tried to limit the groups coming in, but that was so strong. People really liked, having the groups arrive. But I'm sorry, Alon, what's your question again? I'm not trying to say I'm fake.
Oh, like, what were some of the, if, for example, I was like a young mother coming.
Oh,
yeah. What were some of the other programs?
Yeah, we had, there was a medical clinic that were mostly volunteer doctors, and one time a dentist on Saturday. So we had that in for about 3 months. We had a Vista volunteer who was a nurse, and we were just in heavy, and we got a nurse coming, and it turned out she was like Roman Catholic, and we were hoping to kind of not introduce, because but family planning services were not open to all young women or old women either, not in the time. We did have a medical clinic, and then if anybody had kids, we would the daycare and all that. And then also we were very, if the person, were indigent and didn't have transportation, I did a lot of time driving to Charity Hospital. Now it's all coming back. There's a lot of, people would die of appendectomies when we were there. It was so tragic because in Houma, nobody would even take Medicaid, and not that many people were on it at the time, but doctors wouldn't take it, and they'd occasionally do some charity work, but there was no systemic way to get treatment, and the Shalbear Hospital hadn't been built. So we did a lot of just, driving people to get to medical clinics, which was, and then if the person had a younger kid, we had, the church had a what is it, Methodist Youth Fellowship group, and then we would have just different activities for kids. Like the year I was first there, Jimmy Aver, they took the kids up to New York. They took a bus. I thought it was crazy, but they went in a bus up to New York and to Buffalo, where the two of the women who worked were from there. But it was probably a good thing. I just seemed risky to me to drive a school bus into New York City. But anyway, I stayed back home in Sheffield Dulac. so that I guess would be what we could offer. So it was, you do what you can do.
I'm curious to know if, as these memories are coming back and you're kind of remembering all of the rides that you gave to the hospital and all the different things, are there any particular families that you really connected with most? Any memories that made a really big impact on you, that just kind of stick out?
Yeah, the two things I remember is, I was kind of in love with Anna's grandmother, and you can kind of tell this. I didn't tell my wife that, but so I would go see her a lot, and Chuck and Bruce, and she was just so interesting to talk to, and just do everything. And then, and also, Rose Dean, her mother, who didn't speak any English, and I didn't speak any French. She made the best drum, that fish with this gravy. So I would once a week, I would go to her house for lunch. And maybe we needed the Homa Language Project to give us a common tongue. And so I don't know what we would talk about. We'd talk to each other, and she'd show me her baskets, and I just have the best fish you could ever imagine, And so that was, I went on to work in psychiatric hospitals and in management. And, in so many careers, like, you don't, other than like social workers that are working in direct care, and people in hospitals, you don't get a chance to appreciate the daily lives and the struggles and how resilient people are and how smart they are to just scratch out a living. People just say, oh, they're, kind of market failures, they're, dragging down society. So many people that in those conditions just are very heroic, but they're able to do and what they'll sacrifice for their kids to have them, their lives be better. So it was a wonderful job for me to get to know, people of very, very different circumstances. I used to go around, and everybody would go, they all go, you come in, they go, you got to excuse the house. I go, oh, my place is really good. And then you come in and they give you this coffee. It was like from the gods. It was like this little cup, but it was about like an eighth of an inch of coffee. And like, you didn't want to say no. So I'd have about 8 of these by 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I'd go, how can I help anybody? They got me high on coffee. I wonder, is there, like Alana, your Uncle Chuck, like, is there a way to work with like all the people from that live in Homa now? That are maybe tangentially involved. After Anna Mae passed away, probably Chuck doesn't necessarily go down there that much. Is that group? I know a lot of more people that economically got ahead. Just moved to Homa off, and is there much
of the? So that's a big issue. Is that like the younger people who still do live in Dulac, most don't speak the language, so they have. It's just limited. And then of, if they're coming from Homa, so language is a big piece that people just don't have a way to talk with elders.
Right.
Yeah. So that's one piece. But then I just think there's just less young people, families in general, like with the risks of the intensity and frequency of the storms and rising sea levels. It's like every time you go down, it is literally just kind of the land itself is really disappearing, and it's really hard for people to stay. And unfortunately, a lot of the people who are staying are elders. And so anyway, there are people that are still in the community, but I think it's on the one hand, like, you want to revitalize and invest and have these efforts going towards having people stay and bringing younger people back. But on the other hand, it's like every single year, it's getting harder and harder for that to even if people wanted to, just harder to have that option.
I know, it's always, you just do these calculations, about what are the social, historical, cultural, discriminatory, oppressive, oligarchical, obstacles against you. And, life is a finite amount of time. Like, what am I going to put my time into? You got my admiration. You got some heavy sledding. It's hard, It's, it's good to have a great network like it looks like you have.
I'm glad we can commiserate.
Well, I'm inspired anyway. I don't know what I'll go out and do about it.
Thank you so much for, this was so fun. It's so nice having this, this friendship and this support group of, these beautiful, wonderful women who are all interested in, really invested in, this community that none of us physically live in, but care so much about.
Yeah. I always thought, like in the heyday of the civil rights movement in the 60s, what was so wonderful is that at the front of it were this woman, Ella Baker, and Fannie Lou Hamer, and John Lewis. And there was such just wonderful moral people that loved each other and had this tie. And that was so important, and you got to have love in there, about the people that you're working with and hanging with, and that hangs you all together, So.
Yeah. Well, so good to talk with you. Thank you for spending a late Monday night with us.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. This was just so fun. And as I say, if there's ever anything, I can do that doesn't get in the way or something, and and if there's anyone to talk to down there that's kind of trying to do something that would be, who knows? Information from 50 years ago has kind of a shelf life of probably 6 months. But anyway, it's anything I can do to do it.
Obviously not for people like us. We're still interested in it.
Yeah. Thank you all very much for having me. And
thank you.
We all get to see each other face to face. I know I'll see Alana face to face, hopefully, but Brittany and Michelle, to meet you guys too. I always wish that that Lewis Gates and that program he does in genealogy, there's a lot of white and black families, there's a lot of stars. I always wish he would do some Indian families. It would be so fascinating, particularly like remnant tribes. And it just, I wish you guys could write.
I know. I was thinking about that too. I might have to call him. And I was like, it would be so
cool. You never know too when you write, just a letter, not email. You just do a lot of times when people are like so shocked, here's a letter, and they're not yelling at me.
Well, that's one of the things we found out at Tesla time, that we're probably, a lot of us, since we're all related, are probably related to Jean Lafitte, the pirate.
Is that right?
Pirate that helped win the battle in New Orleans. Yeah.
Oh, I know. That's it. Well, that's that's really good. The genealogy that really does interest people, and that's cool.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, you all take care, and
all right. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay, you take care.